Hello, and welcome to the United Countries Special. My name is Tatiana Shamrai. We broadcast from the studio of the National Television Company of Ukraine. You can find us online at www.firstva.com, or you can find us on your digital and satellite networks. Please pay attention to your screens for information on how to find us there. We continue speaking about the current political and other economical situation in Ukraine. And it is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker tonight, who will share his expertise on the current situation in the pharmaceutical sphere, namely concerning the medicines. And then we will probably discuss some of the healthcare issues that exist. So it is my pleasure to introduce Dmytro Alешko. Thank you for joining our studio tonight, and thank you for coming to share your expertise. Dmytro is a partner with law firm Legal Alliance company. His specialization is pharmaceuticals law. That is why his expertise is extremely valuable for us. Thank you, Dmytro, again. To start off, we all know that currently Ukraine is experiencing a problem. There was a high increase in prices on medicines, nearly 50%. For us as a population, as lay people, that is the consequences probably of a problem, because you, as an expert, as an insider of the sphere, you know that what led to these problems, and you probably can tell us more about existing problems. So we would like to hear that.
Thank you, Tatiana. You see, we talked about that problem several weeks ago, and if you take a look at my publication and websites 2 or 3 weeks ago, we warned our Ministry of Healthcare and we warned our government that people would face the problem of increasing price for drugs, and there are several reasons why it happened. The first reason is the rate of our national currency to foreign currencies, and the second problem is implementation VAT. And as for VAT, VAT as itself, it's not a problem, but the problem was how it was implemented. The draft law was created by the Ministry of Finance, and during the time when they were creating that law, they made a mistake, and instead of 7% VAT for every import operation, they actually implemented 20% of VAT for import operations.
Do you see that this was an intentional deed by them, or was it just a mistake? Someone was negligent in drafting the law?
Yes, I'm sure that it was a mistake, and it happened because the first version of that draft law, which was submitted to Parliament, included the VAT for the first delivery, but the members of Parliament decided to change that law during the time when they were voting, and they decided to implement VAT for every step, every operation. And it was made quite quickly, and that's why when we saw the law which was published in official sources, we noticed that there was a huge mistake, and from the very beginning we started addressing different government bodies in purpose for changing that law, and firstly they didn't want to say that it was a mistake, but after the customs offices started
apply the new rules?
Yes, and wanted from every distributor to pay the VAT at 20%. They understood that there was a mistake, and it was discussed during the meeting with the Prime Minister of Ukraine, Arseniy Yatsenyuk, and he was quite angry when he knew that there was such mistake, and he ordered the Ministry of Finance to prepare the amendments to that law immediately, and he promised to ask Turchinov just to help to revote that law one more, and it was made on the 10th of April. And unfortunately, we don't have import of drugs as for now, and that law was signed by Turchinov only today, okay. And only tomorrow the situation will change, and we'll have the VAT 7% for every import operation.
So do you understand it correctly that prior up to this date, after the new VAT rules were applied, that actually the drugs were not imported at Ukraine, and actually they were waiting at the border of Ukraine, the customs, yes, because yes, the producers of the drugs, the importers, did not want to pay overpriced yes, taxes?
Yes. The Prime Minister announced that by the date of the 10th of April, about 170 trucks were standing by the border, and no one distributor was ready to pay 20% of VAT for that, because in such hard circumstances they don't have enough money sources to pay for that.
And so did you see that the medicines market suffered a lot, namely that some medicines were already missing from the drugstores, and hospitals were claiming that they needed the medicine, so please change the situation, that they were urging the government to take necessary action. Did you see that?
Yes. I had a meeting with the head of rep office of one quite big producer, foreign producer, and I asked him if they check how many drugs are left in storage in Ukraine, and he answered, of course, we are checking that day to day, and they understand that there is a lack of some drugs, they are absent, and there is no guarantee that they will supply these drugs in the nearest future, because the distributors refused to order new drugs from abroad.
Okay, but starting from tomorrow, we hope the situation will stabilize a bit. Can we count on that with the new rules, with the right VAT tax being implemented?
Yes, but there is one more problem. Drugs must be stored in certain conditions, and during the time when all the trucks were standing on the border, they actually had to have the engines on just to store those drugs in proper conditions, and no one guarantees that it was done actually, so they could face the problems when they will come to
the final destination?
State service of drugs of Ukraine, and they have to go through laboratory control, and there is no guarantee that they will go through this stage.
Okay, well, we'll hope that the drug will pass the examination, and we hope that our patients do not get bad drugs, bad quality drugs, at least for that.
Yes, we will hope to.
Okay, so that problem with VAT looks like it is resolved at least now. So now we will have the right 7% rate,
yes,
not the 20% rate that was applicable. So we hope for better there. Why was the need for VAT introduction overall? Why did we face the need of it?
Yes, I talked to the Ministry of Finance, to people who are responsible for VAT, and they told me that it was the demand of IMF, and it's one of the parts of our agreement with the IMF, and without that point of agreement, we'll have problem with financing in the future. Okay. It's one reason, and the second reason is that people in government think that our patients get the drugs in Ukraine in a higher price in comparison with foreign countries, because some of the price the distributors live in offshore jurisdictions, and the VAT will help to change that situation, and if you deliver the drugs in a high price, you will pay more VAT. But as for me, in my own opinion, I have some doubts, because 7% will not solve that problem.
However, still, since Ukraine was facing this problem of having low budget, no budget at all, in the current situation, so basically introduction of that 7% VAT rate was one of the ways to fill the budget, correct? So
yeah, yes. Correct. And but there is one more point here, that all our state agencies can't buy the drugs from distributors, because they don't have any budget financing now, and they can't guarantee to the supply of drugs that they will pay for the drugs during 2014.
So now we have a problem we are facing, do I understand correctly, but we are facing the problem of public procurement with prices.
Yes,
so what will the consequences be for ordinary people, for lay people in Ukraine? So we have the problem with public procurement. What will the patients get?
I hope that our Ministry of Health Care will fix this problem, and at least people who suffer on some diseases like diabetes, they will get their drugs, because from that depends their life, and I hope that the government will find money, at least for those purposes. But people who don't take part in different government programs, of course, they will get some problems, and at least it will be quite difficult to come to drugstore and to buy all the drugs that they need, because of the price and lack of drugs and so on.
So do you suspect, would you advise that people who know that they will need some drugs in the future, they would better buy some drugs now to have them in stock at home, if they can storage them, of course, properly? Would you advise that, or do you think it's not necessary?
On one hand, yes, but on the other hand, we have quite good news for yesterday and for today. I mean that the rate of currency goes down, and maybe if our national bank will keep that situation in the future, the total price for drugs will go down.
Okay, so
Yes.
basically you would recommend for us to observe how the exchange rate changes, and then if it goes down, then we should be calming ourselves down and not panicking. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. I hope our viewers will follow that advice, those who are concerned with the drugs problem. So do you see any other steps that government is taking now in the sphere of pharmaceuticals and healthcare to fix the existing problem in the pharmaceutical sphere and to deal with the low budget there?
In my opinion, our government and the Ministry of Health Care especially have to think on the change of the model of our health care system in Ukraine, and such model as we have now, it can't be financed in a proper way because it needs more and more money, and firstly our budget is financing our needs for Medicare, but at the same time the patients come into hospitals and have to pay for that by themselves. So it's not correct, and it's not. We are not honest with our people when we say that our healthcare system is free of charge. It's not honest. So maybe in such conditions as we are now, it's right time to say about the amendments of our constitution and to implement the healthcare insurance, and in such case I'm sure that we will get some changes for good in several years. And some people say that our healthcare system is not ready for health care insurance. I don't agree with that because it won't be ready for many years more. And if I take such decision, I would offer to implement it even in 2 months, to change the constitution and to implement the healthcare insurance system. And in this case, the whole system will change by itself, and all people will feel the difference in healthcare system, because we don't need so big hospitals. All of us pay for that from our pockets when we pay taxes, and we don't need so many nurses, we don't need so many doctors in some spheres, so it has to be changed in the nearest future.
Do you already know that there are some current reforms that are being implemented, that direction, that we already have work groups working on this reform, or is it still just planning and talking?
You see, there are some draft laws concerning healthcare insurance system, and many of them say that we will expect such changes in 2015 or in 2016, but it's too late. It's impossible to stand such situation anymore.
Because probably the system that exists now, it requires a lot of government support, a lot of state support, and a lot of money from the budget. So if we shift to this system that you are speaking about, right, about the healthcare insurance system versus our system that we have in place, then the burden will be more on the people, but people will be knowing what they're paying for because they're getting those services, right? So the state will not have to have that big a budget for that. Is that correct?
Exactly. Now, our ministry says that they need 7% more taxes for implementing healthcare system in Ukraine. But for example, one part of that new tax we could take from the other taxes which we pay when we get our salary in company. And the second part of that tax we could we could ask our employees to pay in such way how it happens in the States, for example. They share that tax between employer and employee, and it's much better because in that case their doctors will get quite good salary, and their hospitals could buy new equipment, and there will be a competition between hospitals, even between state hospital and municipal hospitals. It's very good, and they will have to cut their doctors, nurses. They will have to optimize their premises and so on. It will help everybody.
Okay, except probably for those nurses and doctors who will have to leave their workplaces.
No, it's not so. They could go and to study for a new profession and work not in that hospital but in another one, and it's good. It's market.
Okay, yeah. Good. So then we will not be facing a lot of unemployed nurses and doctors.
No.
Good, because we want positive reforms, but of course we understand that all reforms go through painful processes of changes, and sometimes those changes not always are pleasant ones.
Sure.
Well, we'll hope for better there. Is the new government, are the new people in the government actually really open for discussions? Do they want to hear practitioners, you as representative of business, legal business, who does your business in the pharmaceutical sphere's law? Do they want to hear from corporations, from the producers? How perceptive they are of the comments, of the feedback that you provide to them? Because their actions, they decide something and then they implement, but it is you who have to live with this reality, and you who suffer sometimes from decisions that were taken prematurely or maybe sometimes too much in a hurry, as with the VAT tax.
Yes, yes, they are quite open for discussion, for cooperation. And for example, I am the vice president of the Association of Operators of Medical Devices in Ukraine, and we are in quite good cooperation with the Ministry of Health now, and they hear us, and they learn our propositions, and we have quite good dialogue. Yes, it's so, but there is the whole problem in the Ministry of Health that mostly people who work inside the ministry, they get the average salary about 2,000 hryvnias or 2,000 hryvnias and half for their work, and of course it's quite hard to find good professionals and good specialists for such low salary, and it's hard to fight corruption in such conditions. That's why we try to help, and if they need the help in creating draft laws and in some advices, we try to support them, and as for now we have quite good dialogue.
Excellent. Since we already touched on the reforms question, I want to ask you about another possible reform. There is a lot of discussion going on now about the so-called family health care system, where we have these family physicians. How do you see that reform? Will it do much good to us? Will it do any good? Will it do no good to our current situation in Ukraine?
It's much better than it was before, as for me. And we had and we have quite strange situation when you have some problems with your health. You try to get to the doctor in a hospital, but it's not correct. In all civilized countries, firstly you have to contact a family doctor, and only that doctor could make a decision if it's worth to send you to the hospital or not. So it's quite expensive way, as we chose in our country to get to the hospital in every problem with your health. So I hope that all the reforms which were started by our Ministry of Health Care, they will help to change the system as itself, and it will work in the future in the proper way.
So you predict good results then with this family physicians?
Only in combination with the health care insurance.
Okay.
Without health care insurance, it's way to nowhere, and we will spend that money for reforms.
We'll waste them.
Yeah, we'll waste them just for nothing.
Okay, so then the combination of the two reforms then should be implemented together. Yes. Okay, so basically, does the ministry realize that, and do they pay similar attention to both of the reforms, or do you see that they actually emphasize on one of them?
The Minister of Health Care, Alешko, announced that he is going to evaluate the results of the reforms now, and only after that they will make a decision where to go further. So I hope that the proper people will take part in such working group concerning evaluation the reforms, and they will offer society some good way how to change the healthcare system in Ukraine. But I didn't hear that he was talking about healthcare insurance system, and you're right when you say that they pay attention only one side of reforms in Ukraine. It's my own opinion.
Okay. Well, you have enough expertise to give your opinion, so we value that. Do you know when there will be these evaluations of reform? So when will they be reassessing whether they are proceeding the right way or whether they should adjust somehow their reforms? Do you know when to expect these evaluations?
There is one good news that they agreed to get help from World Bank, and one of the projects, quite big project of World Bank, starts now in the Ministry of Health Care, and I think that quite a professional specialist will take part in this work, because they will be paid by World Bank, and I expect that in 2 or 3 months they could understand where to go now.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Well, hopefully in 2 or 3 months we'll have some good news, and we'll know where our system is going, because reforms are always nerving. All of us are nervous about which way the reform will come out, this way or the other way. So of course all of us hope for better. But with your perspectives and what you're saying, I hope that our government has enough expertise and they have enough experienced people and professionals who will be helping them.
I hope too. When I worked in the Ministry of Health Care, I was the head of legal department, and it was in 2003, and we submitted the draft law of healthcare system that time to the parliament, and there was a lack of just 6 voices to adopt that law that time, and of course I regret that it didn't happen, because you see, we just waste 10 years more.
Wow, back in 2003. So
Yes.
you had your right guesses 10 years ago, well, 11 years ago now.
Yes.
Well,
And the minister who was working that time, he supported healthcare system totally, and he wanted that law to be adopted by parliament. But the whole political situation didn't allow to adopt that law.
Okay. Well, hopefully now the ministry and the people in the government will appreciate experts who were thinking that proactive back 10 years ago, and they will be open to discussion with you and with your fellow colleagues. In fact, speaking about the discussion and the dialogue between the practitioners, the business world, and the government, what changes can we expect recently, maybe in the law on medicines, etc.? Because I know that there are a lot of considerations as regards how the law should be changed. So should we be expecting anything anytime soon?
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you for your question. Now, the committee of our parliament created a working group which has to create a new draft law on medicines in Ukraine. 37 people are in that group. They are representatives of different associations, different parts of business. There are representatives of our national producers, and there are representatives of foreign producers, and quite professional people are inside that group. And I was asked to head the legal division of that work, and now we are working on the whole structure of that law, and we agreed with all members of that group that the future law will be based on European legislation in that fields, and of course we will use all European experience in purpose to implement much more principles of European law in our new law.
Yeah. Well, that goes along with the overall policy of integrating and actually approaching our Ukrainian legislation to the European legislation. So that's the right way to do it if we want to be closer with the EU.
Yes, finally everyone understood that it's no sense to invent the bicycle. There are people who had already thought on those problems, and they created their law, which has been working for many years quite correctly in Europe, and why we can't take that law and to create our law based on European practice.
Yeah, because it's the best way always to take something that effectively works somewhere and adjust it to our reality, correct?
Sure, yeah.
So do I understand it correctly that the new law on medicines that is being developed now by the work group that you are also leading, it will be a whole new concept, so it will be totally different from the one, so we're not speaking about changes being introduced to the new existing law on medicines, right? But it will be basically new from scratch, as they say, law.
Yes. Why I agreed to start working on that project, because when I was invited by Andriy Shipko, the member of parliament who is responsible for the work on that law, he asked me just to start working from the blank page. Yes, so that's why I agreed, and I didn't hear about any lobbying interest and so on. So I have European experience, and I have a blank page, and it's quite interesting work for the lawyer who works in that field.
And you have a good amount of expertise, and you have obviously a good team, because I think you mentioned 37 people being in the workroom, so that seems like a lot of professionals who actually nicely represent the businesses, the producers, the distributors, so all of the groups, all of the stakeholders that actually live with the reality of the law once it's being implemented. So we should be expecting something really practical, not torn apart from the reality, correct?
I hope that I will be allowed to continue my job as I started from the blank page, because if someone starts lobbying some interests, it will be way to nowhere, and we will not get that law ever. So.
And we don't want to be obviously repeating the same mistakes. If we had something that was not working effectively because of the way it was drafted and how it was drafted and what influenced the final project, then we don't want obviously the same thing to happen with the new law, because obviously the society wants changes, and the practitioners have been crying out a long time ago for changes. Since when have you realized that the law on medicines need to be changed completely? Since when was the need among the business world?
I wanted to change that law from the time I had some experience in pharmaceutical law, because it was changed many times by the parliament, and it doesn't seem the whole document now, so it needed to be changed 10 years ago.
So 10 years ago again. So 10 years we were living with the reality of not having a proper law as well.
Yes.
And 10 years ago you already knew that we had to change our healthcare system to live with better healthcare in Ukraine overall.
Yes, but what is good that I have been working on that law for 10 days, and I didn't get any proposition with the lobbying interests. So I'm getting propositions from different members of the group, but they concern just the body of law, the construction. So I'm happy with that.
So you get practical advice, and you do not get anyone interfering trying to push their own interests there.
At least by now.
Excellent. Well, then we should be expecting a good law to come out. And my question to the end of our conversation: when do you expect the work on this draft law to be ended, and when can we start? When can we be speaking about the first discussions of the first draft that will be open to public discussions?
We have a deadline. It's the end of June. So by the end of June, we have to present some draft law which could be discussed in the wide society in Ukraine.
So end of June.
Yes.
And, do you expect, because I know that this is a lot of work, and this is a big chunk of work that needs to be done in terms of adjusting the European legislation to our Ukrainian reality, and taking in consideration all the big chunk of the legislation that we have and procedures that we have. Do you foresee that it is doable by the end of June with the group that you have?
It's a hard question. I hope that we could do it. Now we have quite good cooperation with the members of group, and I hope that I will do it by time, but I hope that everyone could pay enough attention and spend his time just to work on what we will prepare for that time, and we will finish that work by the end of June.
Excellent. Well, hopefully everything works out the way you want it to work, and I hope that you keep up your good initiatives and the good group of people that you have collected so far, and that all of you work effectively, productively together, and no further interference is there. By the way, are you at some point concerned about what presidential elections will bring in terms of your work on the draft law?
I hope that that process will not influence my work, and I don't want that. And I'm sure that any person who will become the president of Ukraine will support that work and that direction.
Thank you. Well, we do so too. Thank you.
Thank you, Tatiana.
It was Dmytro Alешko with us today, partner with the law firm Legal Alliance company, who was sharing his views on the problems existing now in the healthcare system and in pharmaceutical system sphere of Ukraine. You were watching the United Countries special. It was Tatiana Shamrai working with you in the studio here. We were broadcasting from the studio of the National Television Company of Ukraine. Please see us online at www.firstua.com or on your digital and satellite networks. For more information, please see our website. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching us. Take care and goodbye.